All right, guys, so we're a long way to video of the 996 sitting here all together and all done. Now, during this project, we actually discovered a few things that we need to talk about. And there's some crucial items in this video. If you own a 996 of any arrangement or a 997, 987, 986, any of that stuff, you need to watch this video. Now, this car was kind of excruciating, not because it was hard to do. It was excruciating because of the time, the weight on parts, the weight on the machine shop. It was very, very, very annoying, like everything else we do around here. Everything is not a normal, basic car. Any little thing that breaks, we had the timing chain guide bolt that snapped the tip of it off, so we had to wait for that and all the other nonsense. And it just took a long time. And here we are. Well, we probably, how long we had this car, Phil? Probably 2 months, 3 months, probably 3 months at this point. Obviously, we got it within the first day we had it apart, had the engine out, and ripped it apart because we needed to see what we needed. And overall, this thing was in pretty good shape. 55 or 59,000 miles. Ended up needing a new battery. The battery was just garbage. Got in here, if it set any amount of time, it just wouldn't start. And I thought maybe there was an issue at first, but I don't think there is. I think the battery was the issue. And then mixing coolant in the oil. And we did the oil separator, air oil separator. We did the engine oil cooler. That's the two common mixing points. But this one had a little bit different stuff going on. This one had coolant in the oil and oil in the coolant. And it could have either way. Now you're saying, I just bought a 996, it's mixing oil in the coolant or coolant in the oil. How do I know what the problem is? Well, we did find that out. We figured out how to tell immediately what the issue was. And, well, a good chance you could tell immediately what the issue is. And so after we did this, we flushed everything, it's kept getting oil in the coolant. And what would happen with this car, after it would set, like we'd fill everything up, change everything, and it would set a couple hours or overnight, and it actually would fill up the oil with coolant. The oil level would actually rise overnight. And after we got to that point, it was pretty much clear that there was a problem with the engine itself. As far as taking this engine apart, this car is 55,000 miles, but the story was the owner, when they first got it, I don't remember what year, I think it was 2005, 2006, she said, they run over something and broke the oil pan at the bottom of the engine. And they had got a new to this car engine, which is just a used engine. And so once they did that, we don't know the chain of events. It was put in at the dealership, and the car was fine for a long time, but they barely drove it. And then all of a sudden, it started getting coolant in the oil. Well, after we took it all apart in a million pieces, we figured out that the passenger side, rocker cradle, all 16 bolts were all finger tight. As we took that off, went to the head bolts, the front 3 head bolts were crazy over tight, and all the rest of the head bolts were loose, like nearly finger loose. So I guess it held enough until they went on a long enough trip with it, and then it started mixing. And once it started mixing, it blew past the gasket, and that was it. So that was a problem with this. Now, a lot of you guys that worked at dealerships back in the day said, oh, I swapped out hundreds of those engines. That's scary. How many of those engines were actually bad? Probably nearly none of them. How many of those engines had a little bit of a head gasket issue? How many of those engines had air oil separator, had engine oil cooler issues? Probably almost all of them. And this is the second 996 of M96 996s we've done. We have yet to find a bad engine issue. They are prone for cracking heads if you overheat the engine. The best way to not have that issue is don't overheat the engine. If you're driving the car and the low coolant light's flashing, stop. If you drive it like that, what can happen, it can have air in the system, just like any of the BMWs, any of the Porsches, any of the German cars, any Mercedes. If it's flashing and it has an air bubble at the water pump, it can't pump and it's going to overheat. It may not show on the gauge it's overheating, but it could be overheating. So don't do that. The best way we found to bleed these cars, it's nothing there's videos on the internet of doing all kinds of crazy nonsense to bleed these. You don't need any of that. Fill it up, flip your little vent bail up, go start the car. Fill it till it's starting to come out a little bit. Turn the car off. Should take 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes. After the car's run that long, go turn the engine off. While doing this, the heater should be on the whole time. All right. Once you turn the car off, let it sit just a few minutes, start it back up, and it'll suck everything through. That's exactly what we did yesterday. That's what we've done in the past. It's never been an issue having air in the coolant on these cars. All right. Then after you do that procedure, obviously you get the temperature, you let it cool off, check it. It'll be a little bit low, just like a BMW or Mercedes. You top it off a little bit, and that's it. You're good to go. If you have rotting hoses, if you had coolant mixed in the oil and it's set for a long time and all the hoses are squishy, you then need basically $1,000 worth of hoses, at least $1,000. And at that point in time, if it's set a long time and if it's real thick, this car wasn't very thick. It hasn't set very long like that. But that yellow 911 we did, it was like glue. So we replaced all the radiators, all the stuff. You have to do that. If you don't do that, you're just hurting yourself. Once it gets that thick, you can never get it all out. Now this car ran, we have to flush it once or twice and we're good. But we know for a fact that we have no engine problem because whenever we turn this thing off, like I said, you would leave it set an hour or overnight and it would fill the oil full of coolant. It would be like a quart or 2 quarts over full. It'd be missing in the reservoir. Now, this thing set overnight with the coolant system full, oil full. There's not one bit of fill in that dipstick when we pull it out. There's a little slurry on it that was all up in the dipstick tube. Now, what we did, we changed the oil in this thing, was it once or twice already? And the filter was still full of goo from before because it was still mixing. So we put a brand new filter in it before we put it back together. We changed the oil in it. So we should just have a very small amount of oil or coolant in the oil at this point in time. We're going to go ahead and go take it on a short trip, drive it for a few minutes, and we're going to basically bring it back in the lift, put it up in the lift, check everything out, even though we know there's no leaks. We're going to change the oil again and put a new filter in it, and that should pretty much have it all. Now remember, it's going to steam out any residual coolant oil, any little swirls you have in it. That'll steam out through the aerial separator. And then we're going to go ahead and drain. We have straight water in it right now. We'll go ahead and drain that with the drain plug in the back, probably once or twice. We'll refill it once we think we're clean enough and put coolant in it. And we'll do the fill procedure, and that's it. So let's go drive it right now. Oh, here we are driving the car. Everything looks good. We have no issue at all, no drips, no nothing. But I'm looking at the gauges here, and the voltage is only 11 volts. Now, I don't know if this gauge is right or if we're not charging. We won't know until we get back to the house and put the voltmeter on it. But yeah, should be interesting. The clutch, everything is perfect in this car. Of course, it did use all OEM stuff, so there was nothing cheaped out. Everything is done up right. Got a Sachs clutch in it. The car is low mileage, overall, so it's not going to have a lot of issues. And I think as long as our voltage is good, the alternator's charging, we should be good to go. We're going to stick a fork in it and call her done. Got some water on the floor from draining, refilling. We drained it or flushed it probably 5 or 6 times today. It's getting to the point now to where we drain a bucket, it has a little skim of oil residue on top, and you barely touch the finger and there's nothing there. So unfortunately, with the mixture like this, you're always going to have a little bit of that. Once you put that much oil and coolant, you're always going to have little dots of it in your reservoir tank and so forth. We did change the oil one more time. The oil is slightly milky still because it had stuff in the cooler and all that crap, but there was nothing stuck in the filter like it was a normal consistency. So we changed it, did all that. We're getting no ingress in the oil anymore as far as it's not filling up the oil when it sets. And due to our head gasket, our head bolts being loose, before. Reverses now, it's not. It runs perfect. It has no issue at all. No running issue whatsoever. It doesn't smell like it did before. The exhaust had this weird kind of coolant-ish kind of stank to it, and now we're not getting that at all. So yeah, we're pretty much down to this point in time. Everything's back together. Everything's done. We just ran it. We're going to let it sit overnight. We'll top off the coolant, check the oil from cold, and that's it. And that's the 996, I guess, Legacy, right? But yeah, if you see one that has oil in the coolant reservoir, I would say it's not time to freak out. It could be a matter of a whole bunch of different things going on. But the engine should be the very last place you look, like always. Do everything else first. If it's not filling up the oil full of coolant after it sets a couple hours or overnight, it's probably oil separator or probably the air oil separator or the oil cooler. My God, it's been a long day. But that's it, guys. Thanks for watching this 996 series. We'll be back again with some more videos.